Hi everyone, we're here in my kitchen and I'm gonna make something I've never made before because first of all, I think social distancing time is a great time to try new things, and also because I wanted to review bacteria with you. So I got this awesome Paul Hollywood cookbook for my birthday a couple weeks ago, and I'm gonna make sourdough bread today because sourdough bread actually involves bacteria, and like I said, I've never done it before, hope it goes well, but I just wanted to tell you a little about how that works. So to make sourdough bread, basically what I'm gonna do is mix together some flour and apple, and some water. You might have heard that to make bread, you usually need to add yeast, but the thing that makes sourdough different is that we don't use packaged yeast. It's actually going to be risen by wild microorganisms in the environment. And so there's gonna be yeast involved as well as bacteria. Yeast are a fungus and they have eukaryotic cells. They have a nucleus in their cells. Yeast are actually not bacteria, but there's also going to be bacteria involved as well, bacteria prokaryotic cells, and they're in the air all around me, and they were on the skin of this apple. The recipe actually says to use an organic apple because we don't want chemicals on the skin of the apple that might kill the microorganisms. So basically what I have to do is just mix these things together. So I have my grated apple and my flour. The yeast and the bacteria both need something to eat, essentially, so that they can make ATP, and that's where the apple and the flour comes in. These ingredients both have carbohydrates in them, and so the yeast and the bacteria are going to use that to make ATP. I'm going to add a little bit of water just because that's going to make a nice wet environment for them to live in. They're both going to be doing fermentation, which is a kind of anaerobic process where they're going to convert the carbs into different byproducts and then use that to make ATP. The yeast will be doing fermentation where they're going to give off carbon dioxide and alcohol. The CO2 will make the bread rise, and the alcohol will evaporate when I bake the bread, and that's pretty typical for any bread. But with sourdough, there's also going to be lactobacillus bacteria, and they will give off lactic acid, which will give the sour flavor to the bread. There's also lactobacillus in things like yogurt. They're really important for making yogurt, and that's what gives it that tart flavor. And you can actually see some of the lactobacillus species on this, listed on the side of a yogurt like this. So essentially, once I've mixed this together, I have to just leave it to ferment, to let the flavors develop and the carbon dioxide and all of those kinds of things. Normally when you make a bread with store-bought yeast, you would leave it for a couple of hours, but those store-bought yeast have been artificially selected for really fast fermentation. And the wild microorganisms that are in here are much slower at fermentation, so I'm not going to be able to actually bake bread today. This is called a sourdough starter, and so the recipe says that I have to put this into an airtight jar and then essentially just leave that to sit for 3 days, and then I'll come back and look at it, and I have to keep coming back and feeding it more flour and checking on it, and hopefully in about a week it should be ready for me to make bread with. So I'm going to post some updates for you guys along the way so you can see how our little microorganism friends are doing, and hopefully I'll be able to use this to make some awesome sourdough.